A private aviation CEO is warning that New York could eventually tax private jets under Mayor Zohran Mamdani's push to aggressively tax wealth. But online, many people seem far less concerned about the future of billionaires' air travel than the wealthy backlash itself. For instance, in an opinion piece published by Fortune recently, aviation executive Greg Rafe argued that New York's political climate is becoming increasingly hostile toward luxury assets and high net worth residents. And according to him, private jets may be next. Rafe points to several proposals associated with Mamdani's broader political movement, including a tax on luxury properties owned by non-residents and a proposal to slash New York's inheritance tax threshold from $7.5 million to $750,000. But that last point is also where many critics would probably stop sympathizing, because while Rafe frames the proposal as something that could hit ordinary New Yorkers, a $750,000 inheritance is still far beyond what most Americans or even most New Yorkers will ever receive. The median household wealth in the United States is nowhere near that figure, and online reactions to wealthy New Yorkers warning about taxes on inherited assets or private jets have often ranged from skepticism to outright mockery. And that disconnect is part of what makes this conversation so politically interesting, because to some affluent business leaders, these proposals represent a dangerous escalation in anti-wealth policy that could drive investments and jobs and high earners all the way out of New York. But to many working class and middle class residents struggling to afford rent and transit costs and cost of living pressures, hearing a private jet executive warn about potential taxes on $70 million aircraft may not exactly trigger mass public outrage the way that he thought it would. Still, Rafe argues that the concern is real because the infrastructure to implement these kinds of fees may already exist. He specifically points to the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. According to Rafe, the Port Authority already has broad power to propose airport fees and subcharges, meaning a luxury landing tax on private aviation might not require traditional legislation at all. And he outlines three possible scenarios. One, a subcharge on private jet landings, an annual aircraft registration tax for jets based in New York, or a broader excise on tax on private flights operating in state airspace. Now, to be clear, none of these taxes currently exist, and there's no announced private jet tax proposal from Mamdani or the state. But the opinion reveals growing anxiety among some wealthy industries about where New York's politics are headed, especially as populist anger over inequality continues to rise. And politically, that may be the bigger story here, because whether these taxes ever happen or not, the reaction itself certainly highlights a widening cultural divide. One side sees taxing luxury assets as common sense in an era of massive inequality, while the other sees it as the beginning of a hostile environment pushing wealth and investment out of New York. How do you see it?